Good afternoon, Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us for Winesellers Wine Weekend. Today's Saturday edition features another old friend from Winesellers days past and current and future. Going back to 1998 is the relationship we've had with an Australian producer, Mr. Michael Hope, who will be joining us shortly. So we've had 20 plus years, 22 years selling wines from the Hunter Valley, as well as other regions that Michael's been involved in. Not only other regions that Michael's been involved in, but we're going to talk about some of his other hospitality and other projects that he has in the Hunter Valley, including a brewery, and I believe he makes some cider and has a concert series. So if you ever make it to the Hunter Valley when we're not on lockdown, make sure to visit, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to taste 4 wines today. We're going to taste Semillon, which is a Hunter Valley classic, his Chardonnay, his Hunter Valley Shiraz, and a Western Australia Shiraz called the Ripper. All of these wines are relatively affordable, $15 or so for the Hunter Valley wines. The Western Australia wine, the Ripper, is about $18 or $19. And without further ado, let's bring in Michael Hope to talk a little bit about the Hunter Valley here. Michael, are you ready for us back there? Give me the thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right, let's welcome Michael Hope. Michael, how are you?
Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Hope, talking to you from downtown Colburn in the middle of the Hunter Valley, Australia. And whilst it might be nice for you guys, it's Saturday evening. It's currently 7 a.m. Sunday down here because we're that far ahead of America in many ways, I would say, Lee. So here we are in the Hunter Valley, where we're going to have a bit of a taste of a few wines. So as Lee mentioned, we hooked up with Winesellers back in 1998, and the funny thing was when I met Adam and Yale Sager. Yale was a pharmacist and I'm a pharmacist. We sort of hit it off, and we started talking wine, and we decided to hook up and start to take a bit of wine to America. So let's so just remember, anyone, shoot us a like as we go through the session, and I'm going to take you through a few wines. So Lee, if you're okay, do you want me to have a little go at the Semillon?
Sure. You want to start tasting right away and then show some images of the Hunter Valley? Yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
So the first wine that we were going to taste today is your single vineyard Semillon. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Semillon, its history in the Hunter Valley, and what you're doing with it?
Certainly. Mate, Semillon is Semillon's an amazing variety. And what a lot of people don't realise about Australia is Australia is the size of the US in land mass. We're only about 25 million people, and Captain Cook discovered Australia in 1770, and the first British convicts were sent out here in 1788, and the Hunter Valley had its first grapes in 1820. So there's a good little map that shows just shows the size. I don't think a lot of Americans realise, or a lot of people around the world don't realise, how large Australia is from a land mass, which has been very handy with our isolation, because when we had to isolate over the last 2 months, it's really easy because we are all isolated the way we live. So as I said, first grapes came to the Hunter Valley in 1820. So it's actually the longest continuous region in Australia. While a lot of people think South Australia is the home of the Australian wine industry, it actually all started up here in the Hunter Valley. So Semillon is an amazing wine. It's an unoaked white wine, originated in the Bordeaux region over in France. And what's amazing about it, it's really 2 wines in one. When you look at a young Semillon, it's got real nice citrus, lanolin minerality characters to it, quite lean and crisp. And for what I call the ABC market, for the anything but Chardonnay market, where someone wants a nice unoaked white. And if you don't like to try a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and you want to try and have a white wine that hasn't been too close to your cat, I suggest you come and try Semillon. Semillon's just got that beautiful, as I said, citrusy crisp freshness to it. But what's amazing about Semillon in the first couple of years, it is really, as I said, really lean and citrusy. And you let it get to about 5 years old, it shows this real honey, toasty character as though it's been in oak. So it's actually two wines in one. So if you drink Semillon, you drink it in the first couple of years, or you wait till you get about 5 years plus. And Lee's showing the bottle there. We have an aged Semillon under the signature under the Michael Hope series. And that shows amazing developed characters like it's been in oak, and the amazing thing, it hasn't. Now, great thing about our Semillon, it's off an individual vineyard, our Wallenby Brook vineyard out at Broke, which is about 20 minutes up the valley. It's a small little vineyard that sits on the edge of a creek, or it's known as the Wallenby Brook. And we've just got these amazing, intense characters to it. But really, really, really nice alternative to sort of the Cat's Piss Kiwi Sauvignon Blancs, or when anyone wants anything, it's like a Pinot Gris with flavour, to be honest.
Yeah, I get a lot of
Yeah, it's an amazing wine, and that minerality just comes out of the soil. It's a really nice, refreshing characters. When you're looking for a white wine to have on a sunny day, you're having a barbecue, or you're having some nice seafood. You want a white wine that's not going to overpower it, but has some acidity to handle some nice seafood. Semillon's the wine. It's a beautiful wine.
And it has a little texture too, Michael. Is there a little leaves aging on that?
Yeah, it doesn't see any oak, but to get some bit more complexity into it when it's young, we just leave it on lees for a while, which is obviously the yeast sitting in the bottom of the tank, and it just adds a little bit of richness when it's young. And as I said, it just, as you know, when you get to 5 years plus, 10 years is absolutely magic. So if there's I can honestly say it's one of the most unique white wines in the world is Hunter Valley Semillon. It's definitely worth a try.
Yeah, it's if you only knew one thing about the Hunter Valley wine world, it might be Hunter Valley Semillon.
That's it. And as you know, people in the wine game know of Hunter Valley Semillon. Your Soms, your wine guys who know wines from around the world. Because Australia is the wine industry in Australia is actually quite small, and the Hunter Valley only produces, I think it's less than 2% of Australia's wine. So what you sorry, I was getting a note up here distracting me. Because the Hunter Valley is so small in relative terms in Australia, you don't actually see a lot of Semillon exported. Most of it is sold around the Hunter, Sydney, Melbourne. Because people love Semillon. It's a perfect wine to pair with food when you want something that's got that nice acidity to it. Yeah,
and speaking of what it might pair with, maybe we should talk about what it pairs with, which might be something like this.
Yes. Well, there we go. We've got a few people in our front yard there. That is so probably the story of hope. As I said earlier, I'm a pharmacist by trade. And I was living I've come from the country originally. I was living in the city, living in Sydney, had a chain of 6 pharmacies. And I got married to Karen, who was a city girl in 1994, and then decided, well, I didn't want to stay living in the city. Let's go and buy a farm so we can bring kids up on the land. So we moved up to the Hunter in 94, had 3 boys subsequently who all live up here. And along the way, the first farm we bought had 30 acres of grapes. So I was like, well, okay, I've got these grapes and I want to grow the best grapes I can using my science, pharmacy, chemistry background. So after a couple of years, I decided, well, the only way to tell how good my grapes are is to buy a winery and start to make a bit of wine. So in 96, we bought a little old winery, started making a bit of wine, and just got the bug more and more. So what's happened along the way, we've ended up the coal mine, one of the winery we were in, and there's more money in coal for the government than wine, so they made me move, and I had to come into where we are now in Colburn, and we bought bought the biggest winery in the Hunter. It was known as Rothbury Estate. We actually bought it off Foster's, which is quite ironic that we actually make beer here now and they didn't. But my challenge was, how do I get people to come to a winery where I've changed the name. It used to be known as something for 35 years. So we decided to put it in an amphitheatre. I thought we'll just put a few bands on and see if we can get people to come in, and while they're here watching a band, they might drink some wine. So we built an amphitheatre. It turns out I can fit just over 20,000 people, and there's a great shot. That was the only time in the world, the only winery in the world where the Rolling Stones played. That was actually a Stones concert, which is pretty surreal. And there was a local TV crew wanted to come up and just sort of film it. And typical with the way these artists work, they weren't allowed to get anywhere near the stage. So I said, well, come and shoot me right up the top and get the crowd on the stage in the background, which they did. So there we go. We had 20,000 people and watching the Stones. They came on at sunset. And the great thing was Mick Jagger came out on stage and said, geez, we've never played at a winery anywhere around the world. And that's pretty surreal, and a great way to expose people to what we're doing with some wine.
Another concert you had here?
Yeah, I can't even read that one. What does that say? Oh, that was Elton. Elton. Sorry, mate, I don't have my glasses on. Yes, we had Elton John. So Elton came and played on his Yellow Brick Road tour. Came and played 2 shows, full houses again, just under 40,000 over the weekend. And we were really, really lucky that he was. That was 11th and 12th of January. So we were lucky we got in before all the lockdown came in. But brilliant shows. So we've had Elton John, Rod Stewart, Fleetwood Mac, Red Hot Chili Peppers played here last year. Kept the security and the police on their toes a bit, and I politely described the crowd as vigorous, especially when they're out under the stars in a great environment, having good beer, good wine. Everyone got a bit, everyone gets happy, I should say. So we have a great time doing that, and we've now become a destination for the major international touring acts. Bruce Springsteen's played here 3 times, Fleetwood Mac 3 times, Neil Diamond. Eric Clapton was our first show ever, 11,000 people. And what was amazing about it, we actually sold more tickets here in the Hunter than we did to his Sydney show. It's only, I don't know if everyone realises, the Hunter Valley, if you saw on the map, Lee, but the Hunter Valley is only 2 hours north of Sydney, and we're only 45 minutes in from Newcastle from the coast. So, which is the biggest, second biggest city in New South Wales.
So, kind of speaking about the concerts, you obviously serve your wine, and you decided, why pay other vendors, outside vendors, for something else I can produce, like beer, and you're making some cider, I believe, too?
Yeah, it actually drove me crazy because the craft beer scene in Australia wasn't as advanced as it is in the US, and there are 2 major breweries out here producing. One produced one swill, the other produced another swill, if I can call it that. So you sort of had Fosters or Tuies. And at the concerts, because people get a little bit happy, we insist on only serving sort of 3.5% alcohol beer. So you're buying commercial swill off the big breweries. And I was really underwhelmed that I wasn't giving people a great experience when they could have great estate-grown wine, yet they're having to drink commercial beer. So I then thought, well, surely I've got some space here, we've got a pretty big venue, surely I can have a go and try and make a bit of beer. So I went and found a great young brewer, bought a little used brew house off someone that was expanding, and whacked it in behind the cellar door and started making a bit of beer. And before we know it, our first full year, we were awarded the best small brewery in Australia in the Craft Beer Awards, and it took off from there. So now people come to the concert, they get a choice. We've actually put on a mid-strength pale ale, a mid-strength lager, and then for a bit of fun, we've actually put on some sour beers. And it's amazing when someone comes along to a concert where they, as you know, you normally go to a stadium, you get pretty average commercial beer, and they can actually come in here and have some sour beers, some pineapple sour or raspberry sour, and it's going really, really well. Look, it's good fun. To me, it's about people come here for the whole experience. They're getting out of Sydney, spending a weekend in the Hunter, watching Elton or Bruce or the Stones, and they want it to be a classy, fun experience.
And when we come to the Hunter Valley, hopefully sooner than later, you have restaurants, and are you thinking about any other hospitality associated?
Well, mate, what I associate hospitality with alcohol, because yes, we have a couple of kitchens here. We do catering for the concerts. We have weddings, conferences. A lot of the Hunter Valley now is sort of the #1 regional tourist destination in Australia. As I said, we're only 2 hours out of Sydney. There's direct flights from Melbourne. The airport's only 45 minutes away at Newcastle. So it's a really great hub for people to come into for conferencing. Used to have a lot of international tourists. They will come back one day. And the one piece of the puzzle that I believe is missing is spirits, which is the other big boom now in the craft world. So we've actually put our first still in. I think this week we're making our first gin, and we'll be putting away whiskey and rum starting in a couple of weeks' time. So we're going to have spirits as well. So apart from, so we grow, fundamentally grow our own grapes for the wine. We make cider, as you mentioned at the top of the show. We make all our cider out of real apple juice. We don't. A lot of the big guys buy in concentrate, add water to it. Ours is fresh juice that comes from a co-op up in the Central Ranges, a little wine and apple growing area called Orange, ironically, where they grow apples because it's nice and cool. So we actually get fresh apple juice from the co-op, bring it down here, ferment it in the winery, and then can it up in the brewery. So it's a really nice model. And then the next logical progression, as I mentioned, is the distillery. Because as you know, when you're making malt whiskey or single malt whiskey, we can make single malt whiskey. The base of malt whiskey is malted barley, which is us making a beer base effectively, make whiskey wash. So the more I looked into it, I went, well, I don't see why we can't do this. So I did a bit of research, signed up for a couple of stills. Turns out one of my main brewers was actually a gin distiller in Scotland, he told me. So we've already got a distiller in-house, so we're raring to go. So to me, it's about bringing people to Hope Estate, or taking Hope Estate to people as we do when we go to the US and send product to the US. It's about giving them the family-owned, handcrafted, authentic experience is probably how I describe it. Nothing bugs me more than going and buying a commercial beer is a good example. It's just average. It's just nice to have something that has, we want personality in everything we do, whether it be wine, beer, or the spirits, or same again if you come to a concert. We want to go and have a ball, mate. We're just in the business of fun.
Well, how about a little Chardonnay fun next?
Nothing like a bit of Chardonnay. Now, Chardonnay intrigues me. It's probably the one, fresh glass. It's probably the one white wine that I think is much maligned, and I found it quite strange. I remember I was over one of my earlier years going to the US, and I was at the Boston Wine Expo, the consumer, as you would call it, the consumer event up in Boston. And I had my wines lined up, and the lady came up and said, "I would like to have a taste." And she said, "Oh, anything but Chardonnay." And it's like, I heard so many times that people were just not even interested in tasting Chardonnay. And I ended up getting the shits of that. And I ended up saying, you know what, you want to taste my wines? You will taste my Chardonnay. And if you don't like it, you can hit me, okay? Because your problem is you have tasted too much ordinary Chardonnay. Chardonnay, everyone knows, a lot of people know Chardonnay's white Burgundy. The French have been doing Chardonnay for a long time, making very good Chardonnay. So to me, the problem with Chardonnay is it was, especially in the New World, California, Australia, it was the first white variety that people really started to ask for. So when I was a younger bloke, people would say, "Can I try a Chardonnay?" And they just meant a white wine. So everyone was buying Chardonnay. They ran out of good Chardonnay. And if you had ordinary Chardonnay, how did you sell it? You threw it into a tank, threw some oak chips into the tank, put it through Malo so it got a bit buttery, and then you shipped it out to people. So I think a lot of people got sick of those overly oaky, clumsy, dull Chardonnays. So
yeah, Michael, I think there was this tendency to think, like Burgundians, that the riper it is, the better the season, the better the wine. And if a little bit of ripeness is better, then a whole lot must be much better. And, you know, it becomes overwhelming, clumsy, oaky, and kind of that caricature of California, your grandma's Chardonnay.
Yeah, and that frustrates the hell out of me, as I'm sure it does everyone in the wine game. It's like, good Chardonnay is absolutely fantastic. So it's beholden upon us to not produce rubbish Chardonnay. So, but it's also beholden upon us, as I've made my my job in the last 20 odd years, is to educate people, as we're doing, Lee, to say, good Chardonnay is a fantastic wine. Don't compromise. If you get a crap Chardonnay, don't buy it again. It's simple as that. So a good Chardonnay, and we try and emulate that style. A good Chardonnay has balance to it. It's not, as you said, it's not overly ripe. You don't want it clumsy, you don't want it too oaky. So we really strive to get some nice, fresh, a little bit more of that green apple-y character that you get when a Chardonnay is not overly ripe. So again, this is an individual vineyard. This is sits at the bottom of the bottom of some hills, and it's in our mountain wash vineyard. So it's actually got the soil's got a high mineral, a lot of over thousands or millions of years. The rains washed out of this volcanic, sort of granite rocks in the hills. It's washed this sandy loam down. So the soil's quite deep, sandy loam with a high mineral content. And what we get offered is, we've got about 10 different blocks of Chardonnay. And what we strive to do is pick those Chardonnays at different ripeness levels, different flavour levels. And what that does, it gives us some great blending options. So not all of it goes into oak. And what you've got to remember is, being in the Southern Hemisphere, we harvest 6 months earlier. So we have already harvested our 2020 grapes. They're all in the hunter. So when you're buying a Southern Hemisphere wine, it is always 6 months older than a Northern Hemisphere wine. So when we bring our Chardonnay in, we put probably 4 of the blocks into French oak barrels. We don't use oak chips. We don't use American oak. It's always French oak. And then what we aim to do is we back blend after about 10 and a half, 11 months. We back blend and try and get a Chardonnay that gives us enough oak to give some balance, mouthfeel, and sort of lengthen and support the fruit, but we also want that nice freshness. So we want the best characters of an unoaked Chardonnay with the best features of a nice oak Chardonnay, and just that little bit of richness. So a little bit of that buttery richness is added from a little bit of malolactic. So that conversion of the malic to lactic acid by bacteria, it gives us, doesn't sound sexy, but it gives us that nice, it softens the wine, but because the malic acid's that real tart green apple acid that you get. Whereas lactic acid's a bit softer, smoother, not as prominent. And a byproduct of that is you get that nice little diacetyl, that nice little buttery character. So there's actually a lot goes into producing a really good Chardonnay. At the end of the day, when someone gets my Chardonnay, I want to go, wow, that smells really nice. Typical hunter Chardonnay, being a bit warmer climate, we have peach, melon, pineapple, sort of nice, rich, balanced nose to it. But then what's amazing to me, the flavour just goes on and on and on as you have that oak, say, just supports and lengthens the palate without being prominent. So I can still taste it. It's just an amazing wine. So in a nutshell, I say a good Chardonnay has balance, complexity, and length. And the better you make it, the better balanced it is.
I also find that this wine integrates all these elements that we're talking about very nicely. It has tropical fruit as well as some of those green apple flavors, but also the balance between the oak, the mallow, and maybe some, again, the lees contact. It's all very nicely integrated. So nicely done at under a $15 type price point. Is hard to find honest, good Chardonnay that isn't a caricature again of itself. So nicely done.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, we've as you know, we've always done really well in this. I remember one of the editors at Wine Enthusiast many years ago said to me, "How do you produce such a good value Chardonnay?" I said, "Well, look, the great thing about it, we grow our own grapes. For me, it's a passion. If I wanted to make money, I'd just go and buy more pharmacies." My accountant reminded me of that 20 years ago when I started buying vineyards. He says, "You're not going to make money out of this." I go, "Man, I'm not trying to." I think, as anyone will attest, people in the wine industry who grow their own grapes, we're farmers, and it's a passion to produce the best wine you can. No different to someone growing tomatoes, as you call them, tomatoes or melons in your backyard. You're trying to grow in your veggie garden. You're trying to grow the best you can, and the only way you judge it is when you actually put them on the table and eat it, or in our case, when we drink it. So I try and give people as much bang for the buck as I can, and that's, it helps. I don't go through middlemen agents. We deal direct, as you know, with you guys in the States as the importers we have for 22 years, and it's about all of us working to get the best wine we can into the consumer's glass.
Yeah, you mentioned the Wine Enthusiast, and the Wine Enthusiast on the 17 vintage, which is what I'm drinking here, gave it an 89 Best Buy accolade. So they also agree that it's a best value back then and still today.
Yeah, they've always been a big fan, and I just say to people, don't be scared of Chardonnay, but be discerning with Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a great white wine. If we contrast that with the Semillon, you'd start your meal when you're looking for a nice, crisp, unoaked white. But when you're having a richer chicken dish, or you want something that's a bigger white that can handle bigger flavours, Chardonnay is fantastic. It's got that still got that nice freshness, and you'll see with every one of my wines, I'm very conscious of keeping the acid balance right, keeping them fresh. So still with that little zing on the side of the tongue. Nothing bugs me more than tasting a wine that's broad, flabby, and just doesn't light your mouth up. It's got to feel fresh. We can't lose sight of the fact that people are having a drink for something refreshing. I'm very conscious of that. So you'll notice even on the Chardonnay, whilst it's got some oak and length, it's still got that nice little bit of fresh, crispy acidity to it.
Yeah, some nice bright acidity. Helps with those food pairings for sure. Do you want to show a couple of images of the vineyards and maybe some harvesting and some other things like that we have here?
Yeah, good idea.
So let's pop into our couple of images here. And who do we have here?
Oh, that's what I get for not having my glasses. That's Karen, my wife, and Sammy, our youngest son, who's 20 years old. It's too early for him to get out of bed, because I did have him lined up to come and get some shots of some kangaroos. And he said, "Oh, Dad, I'm having some drinks with my mates on Saturday night." So I had to revert to my 25-year-old son, Jono, who shortly will show us some shots. So from where I actually sit now in our tasting room, I'm looking out over the amphitheatre. The sun's been up for about an hour, and we probably have about 50 kangaroos on the amphitheatre, which is quite surreal when you look at it and you think, well, a couple of months ago we had 20,000 people there watching Elton John, and it's funny when you walk in on the Sunday morning after. So we have a show on a Saturday night. Sunday morning there's chairs everywhere, people leave rubbish everywhere. We spend all Sunday cleaning up, and then you walk in on a Monday morning and there's kangaroos everywhere, oblivious to the fact that, one of the biggest names in the world was playing the piano on the stage. 20,000 people were here eating, drinking, and screaming and singing, and then there's just kangaroos everywhere back to eating their grass. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Should we throw the giant kangaroos? So Okay, there's some harvesting. So it's a bit of a myth with harvesting, where a lot of people bang on about hand picking. Now, we probably only hand pick about between 5 and 10% of our grapes. Reason being, the big downside of hand picking is you've got to get enough labour. And remember, we don't have, all our borders are sea. So we don't have a lot of immigrants in Australia, that we struggle with a lot of manual labour and backpackers. Secondly, we get so hot here in summer that the optimum time to harvest your grapes is during the night when they're cooler. And we don't get to do that if we hand pick, because it's done in the daytime. And it actually takes so long to pick. So majority of the grapes are actually harvested in the middle of the night. You probably go out and start at midnight, 2 a.m. when it's cooler, and you try and get we try and get as much in as cool as we can, because it's all about preserving the fruit characters in the grapes, which then translates into the wine. So I'd say that, Lee, to say to people, don't be put off if you hear that grapes are actually machine harvested, because it's a way to get the grapes as fresh as possible into the winery as quick as possible.
Great. And speaking of winery,
there we are. There's Pat, our winemaker, playing around with some of our barrels. And as I alluded to before, we only use barriques and hogsheads. So either, I forget gallons, I was talking litres, either 225 litres for barriques or 300 litres for hogsheads. And we use French and American oak. So as I said, our Chardonnay is all French oak, which is actually an expensive way to do it. And that's another reason, Lee, why you don't get a lot of reasonably priced Chardonnay that's actually gone in French oak barrels. The barrels are really expensive. They cost us about, it's probably the equivalent of about $1,000 US to land a French oak barrel in Australia.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe some other images here to pull people into the Hunter Valley.
Yeah, it shows a nice little bit of scenery there. And great thing about being 2 hours away from the city, we just get amazing, if you're here at night and you're looking out, you just get amazing clear sky. We're far enough away from the city, we don't have lights, and just beautiful, beautiful fresh air. And the other thing is we're only 45 minutes from the coast. So that's driving. It's only about 17 minutes by helicopter. So I describe it as our climate here, we're moderate to warm to hot climate, but we have there's some hand picking going on, some Chardonnay grapes. We have a real maritime influence. So every afternoon during the summer, which is great for the concerts, we get a nor'easter come in, which is a little sea breeze. So we're actually the same latitude as the Barossa Valley over in South Australia, but you'll see when we get to our Shiraz in a minute, amazingly different style of Shiraz. So while we're the same temperature, we're the same latitude, in the Hunter we have this maritime influence, which gives us a lot more, mellows a lot of the characters in our reds. We get much more balance and a bit more acidity. So it's quite amazing where we sit.
Right. Who's this guy?
That's Rex. I think he's been playing around with some reds. He looks a bit, you describe him, he looks a bit like a bushranger. If you walk past him in the street, he'd say, just take my wallet, don't worry about anything else. He's one of our happy winery workers. And as you know, when you're fooling around with red grapes, they actually, when you first bring them in, the colour, the flavour and the tannin is in the skin. So they actually come in purple when you start. It's only as the red slowly ages, you get a little bit of oxidation. It actually starts to turn red from purple. So it looks quite scary when you first jump in with some red grapes and try and jump on them.
All right. Speaking of reds, do you want to taste your Hunter Shiraz here?
I think we should. But what we might do, I've got Jono trying to use some technology up with the kangaroos.
Yeah. You want to get a quick shot and see if Jono can show us some kangaroos?
Yeah, you want to try that, Jono? Are you there?
Yeah, let's pull him into the...
Yeah, I'm here. G'day.
Okay, there we go. So that's Jono. That's, you go round up some roos, Jono.
Right, yeah.
And Michael, they just come onto the property and graze?
Yes, yes. So we've got 420 acres here. So there you go. It's getting closer. Yeah, they especially when the drought was on, they love the amphitheatre because we've got nice kikuyu grass. It's freshly mown. It's and they come and sun themselves. They actually they'll sprawl out. This morning, we can see the sun sprawled out having a rest. They just take in the sun. They love the slope and they love the nice green grass. So they just come in and graze. They live on the property. We've got over 100 on the property. There's a lot of tourists, a lot of Chinese tourists will come in on tour buses and just drive in and look at them. And you can walk up to within about 5 metres of them. It's quite amazing. So yeah, they just, they're all wild. They don't, we don't get close enough to hand feed them, but over time, I think they've learned that they're safe. I won't let anyone shoot them or, because the odd person does eat kangaroo in Australia, but it's not for me. I view them as beautiful pets, that wild pets, if you like. They're just so graceful to watch. I love watching them. So try and get a bit closer if you can, Jono.
Right, yeah.
And he's in no harm, no danger of getting kicked by kangaroos?
Well, funny you say that. I always said to people, no, they're safe. And then one day, back in January, I had a promoter here we're walking through the amphitheatre. He's looking to do a festival here. We're walking through, we walk past some kangaroos, and it's always the males. They get protective. One of the big males actually came up and gave him a bit of a whack on the shoulder, which is the first time I've ever seen that. So they've never full on attacked anybody. They can in the wild if they feel threatened. I think these guys have all lived here long enough and they've all been born here. So they've all been, they've grown up on site. They know they're not threatened. It's quite funny to watch because the males are dominant, the males are bigger, and you'll see the males having little, they box each other. It's quite funny to watch. So there you go. That's our wild mob of kangaroos. I think you call them a mob. Our mob of roos that sit on the property. They don't really they don't eat the grapes. At the height of the drought, when there wasn't any green grass around, except the amphitheatre, you'd either see them in the amphitheatre or they might go and nibble on a few leaves in the vineyard. Okay, thanks for that, Jono.
No worries.
Okay, Lee, so that was wanted to show you our mob of roos, show how real we are, that we are actually in the country, and I'm not just sitting in a hotel room in Sydney pretending I'm, or even worse, sitting in Wisconsin with putting on an Australian accent, pretending I'm an Aussie. We're actually here, real roos in the front yard. And yes, it is bright at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning.
Well, thanks for sharing that little slice of Hunter Valley goodness with us. Let's go on to another slice of Hunter Valley goodness and try our more medium-bodied style of Shiraz, our saddlebag Shiraz, as it used to be called. Yeah.
Wrong one, did I? That looks like it. So we've called that our basalt block Shiraz. Now, the origins of the name Shiraz is quite interesting. Thank you, Lee, for holding that up. The Shiraz is actually the Syrah grape that originates over in the Rhone Valley in France. The Shiraz was first brought to Australia in 1832. As I said earlier, the Hunter Valley was the oldest region that's still going in Australia, first planted in 1820, and Shiraz was brought to the Hunter in 1832. So a lot of people, especially in the US, associate Shiraz with Barossa Valley, those big, ripe, jammy fruit bombs. And There's a lot of old vine Shiraz in the Barossa, as there is in the Hunter. But the Hunter's actually had the first Shiraz in Australia. But for some strange reason, and typical of Aussies and the way we speak, words get shortened, changed, because we think you guys talk funny. But Shiraz, the Syrah grape was brought to Australia and it was called Shiraz, Shiraz. But it is 100% exactly the same grape as Syrah. So it's quite funny. So the average Aussie winery calls it Shiraz. The odd one will pronounce it Shiraz because of Syrah or Syrah. So you might hear it in Australia, you might hear it called Syrah, Shiraz, Shiraz, Shiraz. I reckon the easiest way is that I block your nose and go, "G'day, mate, you want some Shiraz?" I think Shiraz is the easiest to say. So I've always called it Shiraz, but that's the origins of it. It is the Syrah grape, exactly the same as you've got in Lorraine, or you would grow in California. But what is quite amazing about Aussie Shiraz, they have a commonality to them that they are all earthy, not earthy, they're all peppery, spicy plum characters. So no matter where you are across Australia, whether it's the big jammy fruit bombs of the Barossa or the more medium-bodied Shiraz of the Hunter, which has more earthiness, whether it's a cool climate Shiraz from down south in West Australia, they still have that commonality of peppery plum spice to it. So our first Shiraz is from our Basalt Block vineyard. Basalt is it's got really nice colour to it. Great colour for a medium weight Shiraz. Now, the basalt is a volcanic soil. The vineyard that this comes from is an amazing red soil as the basalt is oxidised over time. It's an amazing red soil. It gives a real nice intensity to the red. And but what's unique, there's two varieties that are totally unique characters in the Hunter. One is Hunter Valley Semillon, as we've tasted and discussed earlier. The second is Hunter Valley Shiraz. Hunter Valley Shiraz has that real medium weight, earthy complexity to it. It is more a Rhone style in Shiraz compared to your typical Aussie big, juicy, fruit-forward, jammy style. So,
yeah, I kind of liken it to maybe looking at it in old world terms as a northern Rhone style rather than a southern Rhone style.
Yes, it has the complexity, but that earthiness just gives it such a unique character. And as you know, we've had great success in the US with this Shiraz, because when you're looking for a Shiraz that will pair with a steak and not overpower it, or you're sitting at a bar and you're having wines by the glass, you don't want a wine that is so overpowering that'll knock you over after a glass. You don't want to fatigue your palate. So again, remember I talked earlier about the keeping the acidity and freshness in the wines, so you still get that little zing on the side of the tongue. You'll see that again in the Shiraz. So whilst it's got the weight of the tannin and the fruit, this is again French oak. We think the Hunter Shiraz is not big and bold enough to sit in American oak. We put it in French oak, and that just works nicely to enhance those fruit characters. But it's the fundamental earthiness to it.
I also get this nice, again, integration, seems to be a word coming up for me again with your wines, is that the oak is integrated into the spice character of the variety itself. And the two are actually working very nicely complementary. And it's almost hard to pick apart which is the French oak, which tends to be a more clovey kind of spice character to it, and then the peppery spice from the variety. The two are integrated nicely and work well, very complementary. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, look, and that's us. That's the winemaking team doing their job. We always say that the job of the winemaker is not to screw it up. You know, the cult of the winemaker in the new world sort of drives me crazy a bit, that the winemaker gets all the credit. It's actually the grape grower and the farmer. If you go to the old world, It's all about the chateau, the estate that grows the grapes. No one tells you who actually makes the wine. He's just a technician. Whereas you get to the new world and it's all about, oh, the winemaker did this, the winemaker did that. So my brief to our winemaking team is always the same. You guys make the best you can, preserving what is there in the grapes to start. Because as you know, if you don't have flavour, character, depth of colour in your grapes to start with, the winemaker can't fix it. So his job is to enhance that like a good chef, is more how I describe them. A good chef will take good ingredients and make a great dish. But you give him ordinary ingredients, he can't make you a fantastic dish. Okay, so the key, I want to really emphasise, the key in what we do is growing the best grapes we can. That's how we started. That's my passion, and I'm a farmer. And everything we put in the bottle, we grow. Gives us total control on quality.
Yeah, we kind of say in the wine industry that you can't make good wine from bad grapes, but you sure can make bad wine from good grapes. The only way to make good wine is starting with good grapes.
That's right. Everything needs to come together, and the end result, we are judged on what's in the glass. You know, what's made its way to America. When you guys are sitting there now having a taste, we're laid bare. You can't hide. If you guys go, oh, look at the colour on that, it's ordinary, or it's out of balance, or there's no Shiraz character to it, you can't hide. You can't escape that. So it's that simple. It's we have to do everything right every step of the way to get a good quality wine on the market, and that's what we strive to do. And look, at the end of the day, when it's got my name on the bottle, I care what's in the bottle. And let me tell you a great experience I had with that. When I first kicked off, as you know, I travelled the States a lot. We used to spend up to about 100 days a year there, going around showing people, showing the press, showing the trade, doing consumer events, just showing us our wine, trying to have people learn who we are, who Hope Estate is. I remember one night I was sitting with the publicist and a wine writer in a restaurant in New York, and I was only a couple of years into it, and still a bit green. It was all a bit wide-eyed young bloke over in New York, you know, in the Big Apple, one of the greatest spots in the world. And I'm sitting there, and we're just tasting through the wines, having some dinner. And this wine writer leans over and says, "Michael, that table over there has just bought a second bottle of your wine. I've noticed." I went, "Holy shit! I didn't even know we had my wine on the wine list in the restaurant." So I walked over to the table, and it was amazing for me. I sort of walked over to them, and I had a Hope Estate shirt on, and obviously I've got a bit of an Aussie accent, and I sort of walked over and said, "Oh, okay, guys, you're drinking my wine." They went, "Pardon me?" I said, I'm Michael Hope, and that's Hope Estate Shiraz you're drinking. That's my Shiraz, Hope Estate. So I said, "I just want to say thank you for buying my wine," and they were blown away, as I was. And I actually gave them a treat. I said, "Well, look, I can't remember what the vintage was. It might have been would have been probably about a 2000 vintage, I think." And I said, "Look, I've got here a 2001. I'm tasting with a wine writer." So I actually took some over and gave them a taste. They were blown away, but I've got to say, not as much as I was. So for me, that sort of hit home about the power of what we do and how far we can reach around the world. And that, to me, is one of the most satisfying things in what we do. I mean, we're just farmers. I mean, you've met Jono, my oldest son. He was born when we first bought the property. He was sort of the reason we moved up here to the Hunter out of Sydney. And for us, it's about, we're farmers. We grow the best grapes we can, but it's really satisfying when you travel the world and someone, unbeknownst to them as to who we even are, and they're sitting there and they're drinking our wine. So that was a real buzz for me, and it really hit home how far we can reach if we do it well.
That's about as experiential marketing as you can get, having the winemaker walk over to your table as you're tasting the wine in a restaurant,
especially on the other side of the world.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the other Shiraz. Let's talk about Geograph in Western Australia and how that project came about. We'll show a couple pictures to go along with the Ripper, and hopefully you'll take along at home.
Okay, so So we kicked off here in the Hunter in, as we said, in 94 we moved up here. And back in the year 2000, we picked up an interstate vineyard called Virgin Hills down in Victoria. So there's a map of Australia. So we're just, if you've got your pointer there, Lee, if it works, but we're just, we're on the east coast, the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, just north of Sydney, 2 hours north of Sydney. And back in the year 2000, we bought a vineyard in Victoria called Virgin Hills, cool climate vineyard. They also had a vineyard in West Australia, in a little place called Donnybrook, which is just north of Margaret River. Cool apple growing climate, ironically, south of Perth. And there was this 40-acre vineyard there that just grew reds. And my winemaker, head chief winemaker at the time, had worked over in West Australia. He said, "Oh, let's have a go, see how good a wine we can make from that." So we didn't have a winery in West Australia. We did in the Hunter. And we said, well, how are we going to do this? We came up with the idea. Cold maceration is a red winemaking technique where you take your grapes, crush them, keep them cold and let them soak on skins. So the juice is soaking in the skins and extracting colour, flavour and tannin without alcohol being present. So you get a lot of fine, soft tannins, really rich characters out of it, great colour. So we said, well, let's try and experiment. Let's crush the grapes over there, chill them down. We chill them down to about 6 degrees C. Which has probably about 40 your scale, and Fahrenheit, and we throw them in the tanker, drive them across Australia, which is, as I said earlier, it's the same distance as New York to LA. It's about 3,000 miles. You drive across the country, it takes them about 3 or 4 days, sloshing around in the back of this tanker. It's Nullarbor Plains, pretty straight. So you turn up to the Hunter, and whilst it's not a full maceration, I'd call it a gentle agitation. It gets. So by the time it turns up in the Hunter, it's had nearly 4 days of sloshing around in a tanker. Has amazing depth of colour, fine tannins, amazing flavour. And then all we do is we empty it out of the tanker, put it straight into fermenters and ferment away. So we did this the first year. And I remember we had some visitors at the winery, some wine riders at the winery, and we're walking through tasting wines out of barrel, and the winemaker said to me, and it was about 8 months after we brought the first batch of Shiraz over. And the winemaker said, "I'll make sure you try the West Australian Shiraz. It's a ripper." Now, the reason he says it's a ripper, and you note we spell it R-I-P-P-E-R. So in Australia, anything that has ER on the end, we say ah. So you guys go ripper. So my lifelong quest is to teach the Americans how to say ripper. Pretend there's an A on the end. You see, the way we talk, we shorten every word because the whole idea is to communicate. Why take longer? Why keep your mouth open long? You're only going to get flies in it. So you've got something to say it fast. So we don't go Sydney, we go Sydney, Cairns, Canberra, Melbourne, g'day. So g'day is just taking good day and drop out the letters that you don't need. So G-D-A-Y communicates g'day. And rip up, if I say rip up, you know what I mean. So rip up just means bloody good in Australia. So we had to have, so when we wanted to launch, as you know, we wanted to put a second Shiraz into America. And Adam Sager said, well, oh no, we can't do that. It'll confuse people. We've already got a Shiraz. We've already got one Shiraz. So I go, mate, I'll give it a different name. So we gave it the name of the Ripper. So as I said, everywhere I go, I'm always educating Americans that we call it Ripper. So from that day, it has always been our hero red in that it is so big, ballsy, full of flavour. More the style that I think Americans are used to out of Australia. More that, still not your big jammy fruit bomb that you get out of the Barossa. But what it's got is, oh wow, what it's got is an amazing, I call it juiciness. It's a real fruit forward style. You get your, it's like nice ripe plum, dark berries. If you got a nice ripe plum and took a bite out of it, it's just like that to me. And yeah, thanks for holding it up, Lee. You see amazing colour to it. Now, that depth of colour goes back to the whole gentle agitation or cold maceration process. So we have, as we said earlier, the wine is made in the vineyard. So we start with fantastic grapes. Big difference about geographic region where it's from, as I said, just north of Margaret River. Big difference is it's cooler climate. You get less chance of summer rainfall, it's all winter rainfall, a beautiful, even ripening season, which is great for growing apples and cherries. And where it's great for growing apples and cherries, it's great to grow grapes, okay? So we get beautiful, nice and ripe. So we get riper, the alcohol is always higher than the Hunter Shiraz. So we get nice and ripe over there. And it's that amazing trip we do. So it turns up just full of colour, full of flavour. And I sort of call it elegantly big. So it's bigger wine, much bigger wine than the Hunter Shiraz, Hunter Shiraz has more earthiness. The Ripper has more fruit-forward, juicy style. But it's still, what I love about it, it's still got that nice freshness to it. It's not overpowering.
And here I get, I've had the Ripper for years. We've been working together since I started in 2001 and you started in 98 pulling it in. And the vintages that I've had of the Ripper in the past have always been juicy and bright and big and brambly and plummy. Here I'm with the 2015 vintage that I have, I'm getting quite a bit of structure. So I get all this upfront fruit, which is soft and juicy. And then it closes with a little bit of tannins, a little bit of grip that keeps everything in check.
Yeah. Look, it's we put this together for longevity. Yeah, we wanted to be able to travel, and we wanted people to be able to get the full experience, and not just. There's more to this wine than just some upfront fruit, because I think it's too easy, and you get that a lot with a lot of Aussie Shirazes. It's like, oh wow, there's a mouthful of fruit, but what's after that? And to me, what makes a great Shiraz or a great red wine is that the longevity to it, which comes down to the balance of fruit, oak, acidity, and how it will age, but also how long it'll linger in the mouth. To me, that's really, really important. And
let's talk about some food pairing here. We're always interested in food pairing. So we have two different styles of Shiraz, one more medium-bodied, one fuller. Where would you go in terms of food pairing with these two guys?
So I would go, if I was doing a something like the Hunter Shiraz, I'd look at, if I was having a lamb backstrap, for example, as we cook a lot over here. A lot of lamb in Australia, because unlike New Zealand, we eat our lamb, we eat our sheep here. New Zealanders obviously have a bit of fun with them over there, but in Australia, we eat a lot of lamb. And if you're looking for, to me, the Hunter Shiraz pairs perfectly with lamb, because lamb is a more subtle flavour. Don't overcook it to keep it nice and pink. And the Hunter Shiraz just marries perfectly with that. But when you've got your big sirloin, you've got your big steak, packed with flavour, to me, you want a bigger wine that can handle that. So I would tend to, when I'm doing a degustation menu, I would tend to put the Hunter Shiraz, would say go with some lamb backstrap or a beef carpaccio, and then I would go to, with the big steak that we're finishing the meal with, I would always pair the Ripper with that. It can just handle a big mouthful of flavour.
Yeah, my always matching intensity. So the bigger the flavors in the food and the fattier or the richer it is, the bigger the wine can go pair with it. So matching intensities is kind of my basic go-to on that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's about pairing the flavours. Flavour and intensity, because you don't want the food to overpower the wine, and conversely, you don't want the wine to overpower the food. And too many times you'll see someone. It's no good having a delicate Pinot with a big, powerful, peppery steak. It's just going to kill the Pinot. You're not going to be able to taste it. So Yeah, so it's about balance. I say everything in the wine game. If there's one word I ever say to people or use a lot, it's balance. Balance your flavors.
So let's take a second to shout out a couple people. We've got Simply Divine Oil and Wine. We can display what they've had to say here. Feeling bad for three people who tuned out before the Ripper. So anybody that wasn't on board for the Ripper, they missed a good experience. Thanks for that shout out from Simply Divine. Got some people in Germany watching too. We're going to talk. We're approaching the hour mark here, and I want to touch on one more subject before we go. But there was a question. I think it's a good question to lead into. There's a question whether the kangaroos care for eating grapes.
Generally not. As I said, at the height of the drought, the little buggers started to nibble on our Shiraz grapes on the block here at the vineyard, which is a bit of a bugger. The biggest issue we have here with wildlife is actually birds. Birds will come in and they love the like galahs. I don't know if you have galahs over there, and cockatoos come in and they love the decimating the grapes and sucking the bloody nice sweet juice out of it. But the roos are pretty good. When you first plant vines, they might just sort of nibble your shoots. So you generally put what's called a vine guard on them if you're planting a vineyard. Stops the rabbits and the roos. But it's rare that they'll come in, but they can nibble the grapes, the buggers.
And so with the bird netting?
Yes, yeah. Down our Victorian vineyard, they're really bad. Because often the best vineyards are on this nice hardy soil, and you're surrounded by gum trees, and that's fine except for two circumstances. Circumstance one is they're full of birds who come in and rip into your grapes, and the second is if you've got a bushfire, you can come in and burn your vineyard. So so bird netting, and then you use gas guns, and if you have them over there. Bird scare guns where you hook up a gas cylinder to a machine that sounds like a shotgun going off. But the birds are pretty smart. They realise that it doesn't hurt them. They just yeah. So it's actually so what we mainly have to do is you put the bird netting on down in Victoria.
So speaking of wildlife, I know that kind of the COVID pandemic has taken precedent, but there was some pretty cataclysmic things happening in Australia, and the fires most recently with the drought that's happening. Let's touch on that and what we're doing as wine sellers in Hope Estate to try to alleviate some of the pressure on the wildlife that we were just talking about.
Yeah. Look, it's been an amazing 12 months. Obviously for everybody around the world, but geez, down under here we had a horrendous drought. I think the worst drought we've had for a long time. And straight off the back of the drought, because everything was dried out so much. And the trouble is we've got down here, all the greenies don't let us backburn or probably it's the same over there. But too many people don't let us backburn, and which is a natural phenomenon. If you look back to the Aborigines here, who have been here at least 30,000 years in Australia, it's a natural phenomenon that the bushfire would go through at the end of summer, burn off, and then you get new growth coming through. And we've avoided doing a lot of that. So the fuel load was huge. So we then had the bushfire season from hell that was so hot. Again, we were still lucky that we were unscathed here in the Hunter. Say that our vineyards are unscathed. We had one fire get up in the hills, up in the behind the Chardonnay vineyard. Those hills I talk about, it was about a mile from the vineyard, so we were really lucky there. But it really made a mess across Australia, a lot of lives lost, and scary images. The flames were so high, people couldn't fight it at times. And the biggest issue with the wildlife, I mean, it's obviously loss of life. Is biggest issue with the fires is obviously loss of life. Property can be rebuilt, but the biggest impact was on our wildlife. Now, you've shown a picture of the koala there, known as the koala bear, that lives up in the eucalypt, lives in the gum, up the top of the gum trees. It feeds off the leaves. Now, the koala is the most vulnerable animal. Reason being, you look at kangaroos, they can hop away. They can move quickly. They can leap over fences, trees, small trees, whatever. They they can get away if there's a fire approaching. Obviously, still lots of them lost. But the problem you got to koalas, they sit up on top of the gum trees. They have no way of escaping. So the koala population in Australia was decimated by the bushfires, and it was horrific. And we've tried to think, what can we do to help? And they're a beautiful creature. They're unique to Australia, native to Australia. You don't get them anywhere else in the world. What could we do to help? So we came up with we paired up with the Australia Koala Foundation. We didn't just want to donate money to a charity that would spend it on administration. We actually wanted to find someone that was doing something about it. So we paired up with the Australian Koala Foundation. We did some research, approached them and said, look, we want to run a promotion in America where we want to donate $1 for every bottle of wine we sell, which we are doing, and we're about to launch that in the States. And I want people to know that when they buy a bottle of our Ripper in the US, that $1 is going to the Australian Koala Foundation, and they are focusing all their resources, and so they're not for profit, they are focusing all their resources on breeding koalas and actually going out. And one of the biggest issues they had was lack of access to water. So koalas are dying because they couldn't get any water. They couldn't get a drink. So they're actually going out into the wild, and they're building a lot of water stations for koalas. Something like you sort of take for granted, oh, they're a native animal, they don't need it. So this is really close to our heart. It's to say it's our native animal. It's horrendous to see it. Like I said, even if my house had burnt down, I could rebuild it. But when I look at, and you read the figures, it was 500 million animals or something, I think they said. 500 million animals in Australia were killed with the fires, and we just want to do something about it. So we're going to have a big push in the States for I think every bottle we can sell, we're going to donate $1 to the Australian Koala Foundation, and people need to know that money is being put to use.
Yeah, we're doing April, May, and June. So people out there that are buying and are tasting with us now, $1 of every bottle that you've purchased will go to the foundation that you just described here. So, and that'll happen through the end of June. Hopefully we'll raise some money for your emblematic getting endangered or hurt species there.
Yeah, thanks. Look, we really appreciate the support. And as we all know, COVID-19 has overtaken the world. So, and I'm absolutely not trivialising that. It's just that it's harder for what we were setting out to achieve. It's harder what we're setting out to achieve with the koalas, to get some attention on the koalas. So we just want to remind people that everyone's got to stay safe with what's going on in the world right now, obviously. But if they're going to buy a bottle of wine, please at least buy a bottle of Hope Estate and give some hope to the koalas, because you know that you are doing some good.
Well, Michael, we're a little over an hour, which is an exceptional amount of time for you. I appreciate the time here early on Sunday morning for you, and appreciate Jono being able to give us a view into the kangaroo habitat that is your front yard. And you got any final comments? I mean, we want to come experience Hope Estate. We want to see concerts. We want to taste your wine. We want to drink your beer. We also want you to come and visit us sometime soon and bring the experience to us too. So we look forward to that day for sure.
Yeah. Look, I think, like I say, all of us around the world are looking forward to getting our lives back to normal. And I love coming and visiting the States and just going around. And I find it fascinating how you guys all talk funny in every different state. Whereas you go to Australia, everyone talks the same. We talk Australian everywhere, but from down in Alabama, you're talking different than you are up in New York or Boston. And I know there's shit house accents, forget that. But I love coming to the States. And look, what I'd say to everyone is, I think a lot of people are surprised that Australia is closer than you think. It is a direct flight to Australia from either Dallas San Francisco or LA gets you straight into Sydney. We are only a 2-hour drive from Sydney. And it's only, it's a long flight of 14, 15 hours, but hey, free food, free drinks on the plane. Watch a few free movies and you get to Australia. So,
Michael,
sorry, say again?
I said it literally flies by.
It does.
Well, with our time today, let's again thank you, and we'll be drinking some Hope Estate not only through the end of June to raise money, but into the future for sure. We look forward to spending more time with you. And just some housekeeping here for the people that are still hanging on. We'll be back with Winesellers Wine Wednesday and Wine Weekend. So join us this coming Wednesday for Zuccardi. We'll go to Argentina and we'll visit with more virtual friends and friends that will no longer be virtual once we're able to meet and greet. So again, Michael, I'll let you get to your Sunday there in Australia. And here in the United States, we'll get into our fun Saturday night, whatever that might be.
So listen, you lousy bastard. So you mean I could have done this on a Thursday morning instead of a freaking Sunday morning? Good on you. Take the piss out of the Aussie. Make him get out of bed at 5:30 on a Sunday morning. Good on you, mate.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining. And thanks to Jono and everybody behind the scenes that made it work today. We appreciate the time.
No worries. Thanks, guys. And don't forget, where there's wine, there's hope.
Thanks, Michael.
See you guys.